All right, you guys are on. You take as much of the, 35 minutes that we have left.
Oh,
You can
thanks.
take all of it. You can take, 20 minutes of it, whatever, and I will take over whenever you're done. And you have
Awesome.
screen sharing, so you are in control of what you need to do. Now we see
Awesome.
it.
Okay, good now.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
So real quick, I think a couple other people jumped on, so I just want to do an introduction again. I'm Amy Rado. I'm with Ticor Title. I'm your sales executive here, and work with the VIP and EXP groups on classes and things like that. And I have Reed Vance, our title officer here today, and he's going to go over how to read a title report, what to be looking for as red flags, and things that, as when you're looking with a buyer or a seller, that could be important to acknowledge and see if we have to take care of anything prior to listing or during mutual. So I'll let Reed take it away. Can you guys see the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Okay.
It should say 2016 sample report,
Yep. Great.
top right-hand corner. So I'm just going to kind of start with an overview of why title insurance is important. And then my goal is to kind of help you guys feel more comfortable when you see a title report. And hopefully most of them will be through Ticor Title, but of course, I understand you're going to see a lot of our competitors' title reports. Fortunately, many of the formats, they're all kind of basically same. Sometimes the order of exceptions might be a little bit different, but they're all going to have a Schedule A and a Schedule B. They're all going to contain a legal description page, and they're pretty uniform. They're structured through the ALTA, which is the ALTA. It's like a trade union. I think it's centered in Washington, D.C., and it's existed for over 100 years. And so there is kind of a uniform policy format that's been evolved over the years. So hopefully with any title report you get, you'll just feel more comfortable after we go through this today. And the title insurance product has really two important purposes during the life of a real estate transaction. In the early stages, the title report's opened, sometimes even before a transaction is firmed up. It identifies the parties to the transaction. It confirms the ownership of the property. It provides a complete legal description of the property. And then it's going to also list exceptions. And those exceptions could be anything from permanent easements that run over the west 5 feet, in favor of Puget Sound Energy, or an exception could be a mortgage that gets paid off and removed from the final policy. So it's really helpful because it's going to show the whole condition of the title, and it's going to show what rights and interests that other entities or owners might have. And then, of course, it's going to help facilitate the sale to make sure that all of the owners convey their interest to the buyer. So in this sample report, and please feel free to jump in at any time to ask questions. This is just kind of a sample fictitious title report starting with Schedule A, and note that it's got the date at the top of the report. It shows Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. They are our proposed insured. It also has a simultaneous lender's policy, and we're going to also offer a policy to a lender. In most situations, especially if a buyer's financing the purchase with a loan, quite often the lender is going to want their own policy. And you can see from the price, it's about half the price as the owner's policy. One of the reasons is that the policy to the lender is only good for the life of the loan, where a title policy that's issued to a buyer is actually good for as long as they own the property, and the coverage would even extend to their heirs. Once the insured, in this case, the insured would be our buyers, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, once they do sell the property, then the owner's policy of title insurance terminates.
And I'm going to chime in real quick too, because you're looking at some numbers here too as well. And so a lot of times the question comes up, well, who pays for what? And the sellers pay for the title policy for the buyers. However, that loan policy is paid for by the buyers. So sellers pay for the title insurance as a whole, and then the loan policy is by the buyers, and then they split the escrow fees. So I'll keep going.
Yeah. And so in this case, we've got the date of the policy. Schedule A in the beginning of the report pretty much covers the facts of the transaction. Who's the seller? Who's the buyer? What's the date of the report? And when we get down to number 4, we talk about commitment date. And what we're looking at is the title commitment. It's not actually the final policy. The final policy is issued after closing. And that's where, we could have defects or liens or issues, things that need to get paid off. And of course, the buyer wants the title as clean as possible when they acquire title. So that's when we actually issue the final policy. So any defects or liens or things that need to get fixed or corrected, that's something that the title officers, we work with folks to make sure the title is perfected. So when we do convey title to the buyer, they're going to get new clean title. Any liens or mortgages that the seller created during their ownership are going to get paid off in full. And any title issue or defects going to get addressed. And so it's really great. One of the purposes of the title report is to kind of get ahead of the game and really look at anything that needs to be corrected or fixed. So we do want to, jump ahead and be proactive and try to fix things as soon as possible if something needs to be fixed, corrected, or paid off. And sometimes it could be an old lien that's paid in full, but the liener or the, mortgage company never filed a release for it. So even though yeah, go ahead. Please.
Does the, can you scroll up just a second? Does the buyer part have successors and or assigns on there also? Or is that just the lender?
Sometimes that would have to be in the purchase and sale agreement, but typically that would get firmed up before closing.
So it's not like a default.
It's lender verbiage that they like to put in. Some lenders just like that. Yeah. You don't really see that with buyers. Yeah.
Yeah, but we work with a lot of investor clients, so I wondered if that's something that's normally.
Yeah, and we can do that early on in the title commitment, but then of course it's going to get firmed up before closing. Okay. Who the true insured will be.
Yeah. But then for the bank, successors is going to be when they sell the loan, then the policy transfers to the new bank automatically. Is that
exactly?
Okay.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons lenders like to see that on the face of the Schedule A.
Okay, great.
On the title commitment. So in this case, it's an estate sale. So when we jump down to number 4, I'll just pass number 3 just as a note. The estate, in some rare cases, we might have leasehold interest. In some extremely rare cases, we could even insure an easement interest. For example, Puget Sound Energy may want an easement insured. We are asked to insure easements once in a while. Even Sound Transit, we've got some deals with Sound Transit where they want their easements insured. So, and it's just an easement interest, which is less than fee title. But I would say 99% of our insureds is going to be a fee simple interest, which is the highest form of real estate ownership, as we all know. And in this case, number 4 just shows the ownership, which in this report, we're vesting in the heirs and devotees of John Smith, deceased. So this is an estate sale. And then moving on, here's the legal description you guys are all familiar with. And of course, if you are pretty sure that you're dealing with 2 lots, you always want to cross-reference to make sure that both lots are being included. It could be that lot 7 has the home and lot 8 is a beautiful vegetable garden, and they could have separate tax parcel numbers. Some cases, lot 7 and 8 might have one tax parcel number and they're merged together. So it's just something to kind of pay attention to. And when you look at the purchase and sale agreement, maybe cross-reference that with what's on the title report, just to make sure everything lines up. And I'm sure some of you, going back to the legal description, in some cases, you've probably seen pages where it could be a long meets and bounds description that goes on for 2 or 3 paragraphs. And if you have any question, please don't hesitate to call us. Just to make sure if there's any question or, in those cases, it's possible there could be a typo or a Scrivener's error. So, we don't expect you to go through line by line, but not a bad idea to just, if it is a real long legal description, if you have any question, feel free to reach out to Amy or me. Make sure everything's okay. And it's not a red flag, really. It means that the property was never part of a formal plat. Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Ooh, uh-oh, this is out of control.
Is it that?
It's so touchy.
Is it that little thing right here?
Yeah.
Oh.
Sorry about that. I didn't give everybody a headache. I just wanted to say these requirements, I started to skip through this part of the title commitment just because they're just boilerplate requirements that aren't necessarily unique to this specific property. But all title companies include them in their report. It's just kind of part of the Alta format. Really informational notes or requirements, but they're all going to be standard and they're going to show in every report. If you have any questions about these requirements, please feel free to ask about them, but for example, number 11 is excise tax, which is kind of an informational note. But of course, all real estate transactions where money is involved are going to be subject to excise tax, and the seller pays excise tax.
Didn't it switch to like a graduated thing, or did that get taken out?
It did, yeah. It is graduated now, so it's not just necessarily 1.78.
Okay.
Yeah.
And our calculator, Ticor Agent 1, you can use it on the desktop or on your phone, but it will calculate the excise tax for you if you put it in the sales price, which is super nice, so you don't have to do the math for that scale there.
And then it's like the different percentages, and then is there still like a $5 technology fee or something to make the math not work right?
Yes, yeah.
I remember being so irritated when I went to real estate school because they kept saying it was 1.78. I don't know, they kept saying it wrong. They kept saying it was 1.5%. I'm like, except for you add the county fee in every single county, so it's really 1.78. And they're like, yeah, but you have to learn this for the test. And I'm like, yeah, and then you have to unlearn it because it's totally wrong as far as like real estate's actually concerned.
Yeah.
So yeah, just going to kind of keep scrolling through these requirements and notes. The general exceptions, these are all the same also. I'm not going to spend much time on them because 99% of the policies we're issuing is the Alta homeowners policy, and all these general exceptions will be deleted. So our insured are actually getting coverage for unrecorded items. For example, C is easements or prescriptive rights that are not shown by the public records. So we're actually providing broader coverage through the homeowners policy, which is kind of the expected policy. It's very broad coverage. It's expected in our, basically just within our, it's just customary that just about every residential transaction is going to be the broader coverage afforded by the Alta homeowners policy.
When would you check one of those boxes and not have this standard homeowners policy?
Yeah, great question. It's not offered for commercial property. And the Alta homeowners policy is not offered to corporations. So it is meant to be for Bob and Betty Jones, who are buying a residential home or duplex or, 1 to 4 family residential property.
So does that mean
But
if it's if the buyer is an LLC, they can't get that?
Good question. We kind of loosened up on that. If the LLC is in connection to the family's retirement planning, we've seen some LLCs that are like family LLCs, which, we'll take a deeper dive to make sure it's not some, um, you know, company type LLC that's got many members that has to do with some enterprise. But if it's like a family LLC that they've decided to create an LLC for connection to, their eventual retirement, like a long lasting LLC, not something that just exists for a year or two in connection to some business. We will allow a homeowner's policy for a family LLC.
But like a flipping company, that sort of thing, they cannot get the homeowner's policy?
Correct.
So then
But
which one should they
pardon?
pick then? Which policy should they pick?
It would be a standard policy. Yeah. Now we have one other policy. There's basically three. There's the Alta homeowners policy, which is the broad coverage we were just discussing. The standard coverage is not as broad. We do have what's called an extended policy. Typically, we see those with high liability commercial transactions. We do require a survey that's to be furnished to us, and it has to be a very detailed NSPS survey, which actually delineates all the footprints of every improvement, very detailed, and they can be expensive. So we don't really see those requested because the Alta homeowners policy is so broad, but there are some transactions where buyers just aren't really comfortable only having standard coverage. So they will opt for the extended coverage policy, but then we do require this detailed survey to be submitted. So finally, getting through to the actual special exceptions. These are the items that are actually recorded to our property. In this case, we've got CCRs at number one, a mitigation agreement, a water line agreement. Number four is an easement to Puget Sound Power.
Well, I have a quick question regarding the homeowner policy. If if the if the buyer changes from a primary to kind of an investment and changes the name of the owner like into an LLC, is it still covered, or do they need to change that policy too?
No, if we get notice that they want to change the insured, there's probably going to be an addendum done to the purchase and sale agreement, and then we would have to issue an amended title commitment showing the coverage being changed to standard coverage.
How about if it's after? Yeah, after.
Oh, I'm sorry, after closing.
Like a year or two or five, and then they, begin renting it out.
No, I think that homeowners coverage, yeah, no, it would be, it would not be provided then if they change the ownership. Because again, the policy is good for as long as our insured owns the property. And if they transfer it to some other entity, they could contact us and ask about specific endorsements that we might be able to issue.
Okay, because they'd still be the owners. They'd still be the owners of the LLC, just not as their primary.
Right, but then I don't know. We'd probably have to do some kind of special endorsement because I don't believe we could continue to offer that homeowners coverage.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you bet. So again, all these exceptions, these easements and covenants and restrictions and CCRs, we call these permanent exceptions because, they're pretty much going to run with the land. And any buyer that buys this property are going to be subject to these CCRs and easements. Number 6 is the property taxes. Number 7 is a deed of trust, which is essentially your seller's mortgage. And number 8 are probate proceedings. And in this case, we're really happy that the property was probated because it makes it so much easier, even though it's an estate sale. When we have a filed probate, we've got one appointed personal representative, and you can see in paragraph 8 John Smith is our decedent. Going back to the vesting, we showed the ownership and the heirs and devisees of John Smith. We've got the attorney for the estate listed. We've got the case number. The personal representative's been appointed, Joan Smith. So it makes it really super clean for us, and for everybody, for the agents. You know, we love to see probates because it's so simple. We'll have one signer. In some rare cases, we do have co-personal representatives, which is fine too. Where it can get messy if we don't have a filed probate, we'll have to reach out to all the heirs. And in some cases, it can be simple. There can be maybe one or two children, or there could be the surviving spouse. You know, in that case, if they just have one surviving spouse, they're first in line. Washington State's community property state, so they'd be first in line. But it can get messy if the spouse predeceased, in this case, John Smith, and they had 4 kids. Those kids could be all over the United States. We've even had situations where there's 4 or 5 kids. One of the heirs, you know, is rumored to have a drug problem, and the family hasn't seen them in 15 years, and they think they live in San Diego. All of a sudden, that's a huge problem. It could really slow down the closing. And, you know, I've seen it actually kill transactions before, because at that point, we pretty much have to recommend filing a probate, which isn't a big deal, but, you know, some families just don't have the money, and they don't, you know, they'll dig their heels in, they'll say, you know what, nobody's talked to that guy in almost 20 years, and they can get pretty upset with us. But, you know, it's a problem you can see from a title standpoint, because what if all of a sudden that guy gets clean and sober, and we went ahead and insured a deed to a buyer, and then he comes back and says, oh, I'm clean and sober. I found out that my sibling sold this house and didn't even contact me.
Are these things that, like, at what point should these guys contact you to open this preliminary title when they are looking at listing a property? Is this stuff that can be figured out prior to a listing going live, or do they have to wait until they have a buyer lined up?
No, we prefer, if you have a listing, we prefer for you to get title opened right away. As soon as you have that listing agreement, go ahead and get it open. Typically, we see people doing it about 2 weeks in advance. You can even do it up to a month in advance. We can always do what's called a date down. So even if you open it up 3 months, and then you don't 3 months before you plan to list or whatever, we can do a date down and just see if there's anything that's changed. But when you know there's a death or a divorce or a reverse mortgage or any of those kinds of things that may slow a transaction, it's great to go ahead and get it open ahead of time so we can be proactive. And on our last call, if some of you were on that, we talked about our listing perk package, and I can send that again today, but it's super beneficial to do a listing perk package. It's no cost to you or the sellers. You open title, you provide us their phone number and email with the address and their owner name. We're going to send out an introduction, for one, saying congrats on listing your home with Melanie. We're your title and escrow company, but we're also going to send that opening package to them so that they can start helping us clear off some title issues, take care of, oh, is there a probate? Let's look to see if it's probated. Oh, it's not probated. Let's do a lack of probate. So we'll start to handle a lot of that stuff prior to even being mutual. The perk is that once you're mutual, if they've completed that opening packet for us, we give $100 off the escrow fees, and that's split between the buyer and seller because we have to keep everything even. But that helps us be proactive, helps us clear title quickly and be able to even potentially close on a transaction as early as 10 days. So it's super helpful to get that. And you could do that even if it's a clean listing. I've seen agents do that even with no issues on title. We still do a listing perk package. So.
Yeah. It's really important. I mean, 9 times out of 10, your title reports are going to be really straightforward, no red flags, but it's so important because these kind of things do come up. Obviously, a death or a divorce, and a divorce isn't really a red flag, but it's especially in this market where we don't have a lot of inventory. I see, it seems like 20 or 30% of the transactions that come across my desk involve a death or divorce.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
but the divorces, while they're not a red flag, sometimes they're not talking together. So it might not be a red flag on title, but once it gets to escrow, then it's like, oh, I gotta communicate separately. We gotta have them sign separately, or they're fine and they'll be in the same room together. So,
or just quirky thing. Our report will show, Bob and Betty Miller, husband and wife, and then I get a call and they say, you guys made a mistake. They filed for divorce or whatever. How come the divorce isn't showing? Oh, and then we come to find, oh, they filed for divorce in Snohomish County. They live in Shoreline for whatever reason, even though the property's in King County. And of course, we don't search for probates or divorces in every county in Washington State. And these things just need to get, we often have to do a little detective work. Even with probates, we do find like, oh my gosh, they moved to a nursing home 8 years ago and they ended up filing a probate in Skagit County, which as long as the probate's filed in Washington State, it's still effective. But that's where it really pays to get out ahead of this stuff as soon as possible. So if you're dealing with an estate, feel free to call Amy or call me or whoever your title officer is that shows on the report, and just, to get that reassurance that we're good to go.
I would guess that another good time to call you would be when you're dealing with like an LLC or an estate or whatever, and you're trying to figure out who should be signing purchase and sale agreements, or how
Absolutely.
listing agreements should be set up for who the signers are, because it's not
Absolutely.
always straightforward. I mean, you guys have sent out great tools that I've gotten before about who should sign for different things, but we can always just call and ask you, hey, I've got this probate. Who all needs to be on this listing agreement so that it's valid?
absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then
And,
I can
and we'll
help.
want title opened so that we can help you answer that question. So if we don't have title open, sometimes our escrow officer will say, well, let's get title open so that we can see who's on title and who is the personal representative, so that we can give you the right information for signing those
Yeah.
documents.
So
In
contacting
my
them.
experience, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Good. So contacting these guys early in the process can be super helpful, especially on anything that looks like it might be weird at all. Just talk to them sooner or later, and they can tell you, oh no, you're good. Go ahead. We'll talk to you in a month. Or they can say, we're so glad you called us now because this is going to take a long time to figure out and we need to get started early.
Yep. My experience is, 9 out of 10 times it's going to be really straightforward, but there's a few where we have to take a deeper dive and put on our detective hat and really roll our sleeves up and kind of make sure that we're not going to have any surprises before closing, and we've got a path to closing for sure. Yep.
You've got 7 minutes. And then
I got 7 minutes?
Yeah,
Oh, I got
shuts
7.
off. Yeah, it shuts off because right?
Oh, okay.
In 7 minutes, it'll shut off for the Zoom. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't want to rush you, but I wanted to let you know.
Yeah, that's how
and-
I make sure to respect everybody's time. I just let Zoom cut us off at 40 minutes.
Okay, that's okay. I'm almost done here. I'm just going to wrap it up. These are really formalities. Number 9 is possible lien liability to State of Washington DSHS. Typically, we'll get a letter from the probate attorney, and it's very rare that there is liability to DSHS, but we want to make sure that that's taken care of if there is any. That would be a result from the decedent getting medical care provided, usually through Medicaid. Pretty rare. Also possible federal or estate tax. Make sure that that's covered. And if it's probated, it's pretty easy to get reassurance from the probate attorney that we're fine and that's all going to be paid through the probate proceedings if there is any. I think the threshold's almost 3 million now, so it's kind of rare that there is any estate taxes owing. Number 11 is a judgment, and that's because our decedent's name was John Smith. So it's always important if you do find that there's a common name involved, like Kevin Miller, Bob Wilson, John Smith. We're usually going to find something when we run the seller's name. And if you look at the subparagraph, we're asking for an ID statement to determine the identity of the party because it's such a common name. But a lot of folks don't know this, but a judgment is actually a foreclosable lien, and it can attach to real estate. So that's kind of more on the title company. That's one of the values of title insurance is that if there are any IRS liens or judgments, we're going to show them on the report. And quite often we will just set up a paragraph that says numerous matters against John Smith because there's just so many. We don't want to show 20 paragraphs of all the possible John Smith, judgments there are. And we'll just ask for an identity statement and we'll kind of go through carefully and filter through and we'll look at middle names and where the judgment was served. And then we make a business decision and say, okay, we feel comfortable. All these judgments against John Smith are against different John Smiths. So it's really not a burden for you guys as real estate agents, but we will want an identity statement filled out.
And when we send that title report out, unless you're on a listing perk package where we do have your seller's contact information, that title report is only going to you. It'll also have that statement of identity. So you'll see the attachment of the title report and you'll see that statement of identity that we need filled out. So we'll need you to contact your sellers to get that filled out, unless you're doing a listing perk package and then we've already sent it to them. So, but you'll want to follow up, always make sure they're filling that out and getting back to us with title so that we can clear things off.
And it's really not a red flag. I mean, I'd say about 20% of our transactions involve an identity statement because just with the explosion of the population in the Puget Sound area with common names, it's pretty common to see these type of exceptions showing on title reports. Where we really, another natural question was, well, who's going to sign this identity statement? John Smith is dead. We would actually accept the personal representative, just saying to the best of their knowledge, or for example, a surviving spouse or personal representative of the estate, because obviously the decedent cannot fill out the ID statement.
That would be a little suspect.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's just, it's title insurance. So of course we are taking a little bit of risk, but we try to narrow down the risk as much as we can. Not just as a, safety measure for Ticor, we want it to be a safe transaction for everybody, for sellers, buyers, agents, everybody, lenders. In this case, we've got a tricky one because before the decedent died, he filed bankruptcy. This is kind of a red flag. If you see something like this on a report, definitely, if somebody asked me to review the report and I saw bankruptcy, I would not gloss this over. I would say it's a red flag. It could slow down the closing.
If you see this, are you going to contact the agent and say, hey, there's a red flag, or is that the agent's job to notice that red flag themselves?
Good question.
Great question. Amy?
I'll jump on that. So if you're not on a listing perk package, you're viewing that title report. So it's up to you to look at the title report. And even if you're on a listing perk package, it's still up to you to look at the title report, see if you see any red flags. However, in the listing perk package, part of that service, you get a courtesy title review from the title officer, which is super nice. It usually comes like a day or two after the title report is sent out. So I highly recommend listing perk package for that reason, because they're going to look at that and say, hey, there's a red flag, you need to pay attention. Otherwise, it is up to you to read that title report. Now, like you said, you can always call us and go over it with us, but that's why we're doing this class, so you can learn what to look for. So
yeah. And this is kind of a junky title report. I didn't want to put up something really clean because then there'd be nothing to talk about. So I hope I don't scare you guys away. It's just
no, this is perfect.
With a bankruptcy, we need a court order. When the folks file bankruptcy, now the real estate's under the jurisdiction of the bankruptcy court. We would need a court order to sell. And sometimes that can take weeks, in some situations, months. So definitely a red flag. Next exception, title is to vest in Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. Well, guess what? Mr. Buyer is a common name, evidently, because we find numerous matters against the buyers. They need to send us an identity statement. That's the end. I would just add that, we do run the real estate and we look for all the documents, mortgages, easements, CCRs that are posted to the parcel. We also search buyers and sellers' names for the reasons we just talked about. Sometimes folks file divorce. Sometimes they die. Sometimes they file bankruptcy. And those kind of life issues can affect their interest in real estate. So that's why we have to search buyers and sellers' names also.
Thank you so much, Reed. This was super helpful. Any